The use of chemical weapons in warfare dates back to ancient times, but the more significant and documented use doesn't start until the Renaissance. Da Vinci once proposed to use catapults to fire a powder of sulfide of arsenic and verdigris into the enemy, which would cause them to suffocate due to the inhalation of the powder. In the 17th century, armies started launching incendiary rounds filled with sulfur, turpentine, antimony, among other things, as weapons against siege cities, using the smoke produced, which was toxic, to attack the enemy. In 1675, the Strasbourg Agreement was signed between France and the Holy Roman Empire. It is the first international agreement banning the use of chemical weapons. Later, in 1854, the use of crocodile cyanide in artillery shells was proposed by a British chemist. This proposal was rejected on the basis that it was as bad a mode of warfare as poisoning the wells of the enemy. Chemical weapons were used widely in World War I by both sides of the conflict. It started in 1914, when tear gas was first used, and escalated in 1915, when chlorine gas was used by the Germans. Later that year, more deadly gases were also used, including phosgene, which was developed by French chemists. In 1917, one of the most effective and deadly gases of the First World War, mustard gas, started to be used. At the end of the war, more than 2 million casualties were caused by chemical warfare, and around 90,000 deaths were also caused by it. During the interwar years between World War I and World War II, chemical weapons were sometimes used to subdue populations or suppress rebellion. A few of the countries that used these were Britain, Russia, and Italy. It was also during this time, in 1925, that 16 of the world's major nations signed the Geneva Protocol. This treaty prohibited the use of chemical and biological weapons in warfare. In World War II, chemical weapons were seldom used in combat due to the fear of retaliation from the other side. The only country that actively used chemical weapons was Japan. The Japanese army used mustard gas and lucite, among other chemicals, against the Chinese forces in their fight in China. And while Germany did not actively use chemical weapons, they spent much money and resources in the research and development of them. This resulted in the development of nerve agents, specifically the G series of nerve gas. During the Cold War, chemical weapons were researched extensively by both sides, resulting in some of the deadliest chemical weapons existing, including the V series of nerve gases and the Novichok agents. Agent Orange, a kind of concentrated herbicide, was also used extensively in the herbicidal warfare in the Vietnam War. It destroyed over 6 million acres of foliage and trees, affecting about 13% of South Vietnam's land. It also caused much birth defects and mutations and deformities in South Vietnam. Chemical weapons were also used during the Iran-Iraq War by the Iraqi side, not only against the enemy, but also against some of their own citizens. It was also during this time that the disarmament started, which ultimately resulted in the signing of the Chemical Weapons Convention a few years after the end of the Cold War. This agreement outlined the prohibition against production, stockpiling, and the use of chemical weapons in war.
Here are some of the different types of chemical weapons. First one being the nerve agents. They block nerve impulses, causes loss of control over bodily functions. Death usually comes from suffocation. Survivors suffer chronic neurological damage. Some examples of it being the G series, the V series, and Novichok agents. Blood agents. Blood agents affects body by being absorbed into blood. It prevents oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange between cells and blood. It causes gasping for breath and violent convulsions. And the two types of blood agents are cyanide and arsenic based. Blister agents. Blister agents can cause severe chemical burns. They result in large, painful water blisters. And examples of blister agents are sulfur mustard, also known as mustard gas, nitrogen mustard, and leukocytes. Pulmonary agents causes a buildup of fluid in lungs, leading to suffocation. Exposure of pulmonary agents to the eyes and skin are corrosive. Examples of it being chlorine gas and phosgene. Riot control agents. Riot control agents are non-lethal, although they could cause tearing, pain, and even temporary blindness. Examples of riot control agents are pepper sprays, CS gas, and CN gas, also known as mace.
Mucous membranes, such as the lungs, start to receive chemical burns when exposed to too much chlorine gas because of its tendency to react with moisture, producing hydrochloric acid, which is highly corrosive. The reaction formulas are shown on the screen. During World War I, soldiers without proper gas masks were often told to cover their noses and mouths with urine-soaked cloths to filter out the deadly chlorine gas. This is highly effective because of the ammonia present in urine, which reacts with chlorine gas, forming ammonium chloride, a salt that stays in the cloth, thereby protecting the soldiers from exposure. Blood agents, such as hydrogen cyanide, work by delivering cyanide ions into the bloodstream, where they bond with the ion center of the cytochrome C oxidase enzymes on the cell membrane. This lowers the reaction potential of the ion center, rendering the enzyme ineffective, thereby stopping the electron transfer chain, killing the cell.
Mustard gas. Sulfur mustard, also known as mustard gas, has chlorine ions attached to both ends of the compound, shown by the diagram. One of the chlorine ions detaches from sulfur mustard in an aqueous environment, and the rest of the molecule is bonded to guanine in DNA, either destroying the strand or produces cancer. This process is known as alkylation. White phosphorus. White phosphorus was loaded into grenades and bombshells to produce incendiary weapons. White phosphorus explodes when it makes contact with oxygen gas. Notice how the large amount of energy released when phosphorus is exposed to oxygen. Smoke screens. White phosphorus can also be used to produce an effective smoke screen. The byproduct of the combustion of phosphorus, P2O5, reacts with moisture in the air to form an aerosol or a mist of phosphoric acid, which happens to scatter light very evenly, making it a good screening agent.